times any longer than 4 hours for an adult. I know that sometimes work schedules get in the way. A young child should have a regular eating schedule and have a snack or meal every 2.5 to 3 hours. All right. So, right here in step number 2, stop eating when you feel full. So, eat food slow and enjoy the flavor. Some individuals have ignored their fullness cues for such a long time that they may not recognize them anymore. And some adults have an underlying fear of feeling hungry and don't tolerate the discomfort very well, so they desire to eat very frequently. Some people may also feel anxious and desire to eat as a coping mechanism. All right, so number 3 here. Plan to take a break and work and make meals during times that you feel hungry or the times that you feel hunger. And sometimes this can be easier said than done. So some of the tips is plan to drink water and a snack during your break. Bring your snacks from home so you avoid vending machines, and switch up what you're snacking every day so you don't get bored. In many work environments, there's always that coworker who will pick up lattes and treats for everybody as well. So just it's okay once in a while, enjoy your food and make it social for you as well. And then 4, eat before you get too hungry. And I will go into a little bit more detail about this. But bringing a small handheld cooler in your car with nutritious snacks helps indefinitely. I'm a big fan of this, to have something on hand besides a boring protein bar to eat. So switch it up. Set alarms with your reminders to eat. I like to add a positive affirmation with my alarm as well. And so some of these positive affirmations that I will put on my alarm when I'm trying to remind myself to eat, if I'm really busy and I'm got a really big long day that I haven't eaten for like a long time, and stay-at-home moms are notorious for not eating for long periods of time because they just get busy and they forget to eat. So some of these affirmations that I like to have people put on their alarms is, I am getting better and better every day. I am strong. I can turn my dreams into goals. I can turn my goals into steps, or I can turn my steps into action. And this plays a very vital role in our mindset and helping us kind of reframe how we think about food in order for us to start that decision process and bringing foods and packing foods and planning for foods that actually fuel our body. So let's go into the next slide, eating before you get hungry. All right. So one of the steps is eating before you get hungry. And I have this here is because most of us, we don't even know. We don't know where to start. So we start with a hunger diary, and you're probably familiar with a food diary. This is a little bit different. It's not a food diary, it's a hunger diary. And you do it for 1 week because it gives you a good indication of what's going on with your hunger cues. So you want to be sure to record the time of day, and that's very important. And you can put it in your daily planner. You can use an app on your phone. Sometimes the easiest thing is the best. Sometimes I just like to text myself just an SMS message. If I'm in the car and I'm feeling hungry, sometimes it's just easy. A lot of cars are connected to your phone, and you can just click a function on your car to send a text message, and you can just voice text yourself. Super, super easy. So what you're going to do is, in this diary, this hunger diary, is you're going to rate the intensity of your hunger, okay? And you're going to rate it from 1 to 5. So 1 is going to be slightly hungry when you're starting to notice that you feel hungry. And then 5 is going to be like that ravenous, feeling it's going to be like maybe you feel like a headache, maybe your hands are getting a little bit shaky, you're not thinking clearly. That's where 5 is. It's kind of that hangry um time zone that we're in, where you're just thinking like, oh, I just can't wait until it doesn't matter what I eat. So um so then you start planning for a snack and meal when you're feeling, so we're talking about the intensity. So you want to start planning that snack or meal when you're at a 2 or a 3, okay? Because you don't want to eat too soon, but you don't want to wait too long. And then when you're recording how you feel when you feel hungry, whether you are actually eating or not, you're going to record your mood of how you are feeling in that moment. And so I have some mood words here for you. And so this is just kind of just a bunch of mood words that I provided in a slide just to give you some ideas of things that you could possibly like write down. So you can start at the top of that pyramid there, like, oh, maybe you feel nervous or calm or sad or irritated or angry or glad or restless, just whatever. Maybe you don't need to use this list. Maybe how you're feeling is just going to come like right to you. But this kind of gives you an idea of some of the different moods that maybe accompany with your thoughts and connection to when you're eating food or when you're not eating food and you just feel hungry and you're not ready to address your hunger cues yet. And so why is a hunger diary important? So first off, it tracks your hunger cues, and we're not talking about just one incident. We're talking about it's tracking your trends, and that's why I think a week is really good. We're not doing just a few days, and we're not doing it over a month because that's just a lot of extra work. But typically, 1 week gives you a pretty good pattern of what goes on week to week. And it helps you identify patterns in the moods and responses, like how you respond to hunger. And then you will know what times of the day is best for you to eat. You can identify those times when you're feeling hangry, and do you need to plan to eat sooner or make a plan? So these are really good things, and it's good information that we can get to make an action plan. So I want you to ask yourself these questions. Are you waiting too long to eat? Are you responding appropriately to your hunger cues? And are you eating when you're not hungry? So you're going to be able to answer all of these questions. And maybe even if you're thinking about them right now, you'll be able to answer some of the questions right now. So sometimes our brain tricks you to think you are hungry when you are not, okay? So some of the reasons is you're stressed, maybe you're feeling anxious, maybe you're depressed or bored. And I was talking to one of my friends, Mark, and he said it was okay for me to share this with you. But he was telling me how he feels like all the time. He gets home, he just feels really stressed out, has a lot of projects to go. He feels overwhelmed. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know where to get started. And he ends up like pacing around the house, and he just starts eating. He just says, I just eat here and I eat there and I grab a snack here and this, and I'm thinking about all the things that I need to do and I don't know where to get started. And so I just kind of start eating. And I asked him, well, what is the mood that you would attach to that? And he said sad. And I was like, oh, okay. But if you think about that, that was his word, that he identified his mood and how he felt at the moment when he was thinking about that. And you can see the reasons here where it's like stressed, anxiety, depressed, or bored. You can see how that could probably fit in to that really well. If he's describing himself as being overwhelmed, well, yeah, that could definitely be a stressful and anxious situation for him. But he also said sad. And so he was probably feeling sad or a little depressed because he was not getting done what he wanted to get done, and was also probably feeling a little depressed because he wasn't coping with it very well. Okay. So that just kind of gives you an example of that thought process of how that actually has worked with a real person. And all of you thinking about this, maybe you have a similar situation, or maybe it's a little bit different for you, and that would be completely normal if you express a different kind of mood, because everyone's going to express different moods in this. So this is definitely something that I like to address when anybody is working with me. But there's one factor that I like to get out of the way just to make sure that we can just completely factor it out, and it's hydration. So our brain it's not very good at giving us clear messages. Like, it will tell us a message and then we have to decide what that message means. So sometimes we may feel hungry, but we're not actually hungry. We could actually be thirsty. Sometimes we only know that we're thirsty when we feel that dryness in our mouth, or we've eaten something salty and we want to drink something. At that point, though, if we're feeling thirst, we've probably waited too long. And sometimes we can confuse hunger cues with thirst as well. So that's usually something that I like to address very first thing up front, especially if you don't know where to get started, is to get started on making sure that you're hydrated very well. That way, that factor is completely, off the board, and we can focus on some of the other coping mechanisms and factors that may be interfering with your hunger cues. So, all right. So factors that affect hunger cues. All right. So here are some factors that affect them. And one is food insecurity. So this is a psychological factor. Is someone who is experiencing food insecurity, that all they can think about is, when am I going to get my next meal? When am I going to eat next? They're not paying attention to whether they feel hungry or not. They are not paying attention to the kind of food. They are just in survival mode, and they are just consuming what is available to them. And they don't typically like to stop when they feel full, because of course they're in the mindset that they've got to have it while it's there, because they don't know when they'll be able to eat again. There was this story that I had learned about. There was a little girl, and she was in grade school, and she was sitting at her desk and she couldn't pay attention to her teacher. She was suffering from food insecurity, and all she could do was imagine her teacher's head as a big apple, because she was just so hungry. She just couldn't pay attention anymore. So anyways, that's just kind of an example of what happens in that type of situation. And we definitely like to know what's causing an interrupting our hunger cues, because that helps us with our plan of action and how we can help correct that. So other factors is too much screen time. Now, this causes overstimulation in the brain. This is what I did my senior project on and research, and I was actually really surprised that when your child, and this can happen with adults, they just get so enthralled in that time in the gaming or screen time they just get so absorbed that they can be there for hours and hours, and it's hard for them. They stop listening to their hunger cues, which ends up becoming problematic because they will go long periods of time without eating. And then they get to that number 5. They get to that intensity of 5, and all they want to do is just grab like any candy or treats out of the pantry, or just kind of grab everything. I've had parents tell me, they've actually recorded and tried to keep track of how much time their child spends on screen time. And they're like, oh, I totally see that now. They're spending a lot of time. And they said, I have parents who have told me they find wrappers under their child's bed and under their pillow and stuff, that the child will refuse to eat dinner, and they're getting into the food secretly because they get to that 5 and they get ravenous and they get really hungry. But even adults can do this too. They'll get those monster drinks and those high caffeinated beverages to keep them up all night because they don't want to miss out gaming, socially, with a group, or they're playing with someone online, and they mess up their sleep patterns, which is messing up their eating patterns. And of course, they're drinking a lot of caffeine, and they're probably losing those hunger cues as well. So then we have hormones. So we do have certain hormones that are secreted that actually help us with that physical hunger cue feeling, where we kind of feel hungry. But then there's also clinical situations that affect hormones that actually affect our hunger cues as well. There's the environment. There's a lot of things in the environment that affect them. I have workload and schedule. Sometimes I think that is the biggest and the main one. So example of that would be, some people have a really, really tight, busy workload. A school teacher is actually a really good example of this. I've talked to a lot of teachers over time, and they don't get a chance to eat during the day. They are either trying to grade papers, or they have a student in for recess, or they have to cover for recess, or they're trying to get their meetings in during lunch hour and stuff. And so a lot of them come home and they just feel really, really hungry. Their workload, they haven't even had a chance to eat. But that actually goes back to some of the tips that I had mentioned before, is having that cooler in your car, changing things up, and having some nutritious snacks on hand for them when your workload is like that. They're not the only profession that is like that. I know there's a lot of jobs that people have out there where you do have a hard time eating, but your schedule during the day and your workload definitely affects your hunger cues. So on to the next one is the lifestyle. And your lifestyle is going to include like your socialization. How often do you go out to eat? And like, what kind of events do you have coming up? Do you invite guests over to eat? Do you like to eat socially? Do you go to the break room and eat with your coworkers? That sort of thing. There's a lot of things that go along with that. Your activity level. Are you kind of light physical activity? Do you do a little bit of exercise? Do you exercise every day? That plays a huge role. And culture and religion also plays a role. Culture is going to play a big role in like the types of foods that you know how to cook, you like to eat, your family's eating, traditions. I know that there are some religious practices that people do fast for a certain time and stuff. So that's all going to play a role. And then there's illness, which causes metabolic changes. And especially if you have an injury, sometimes that changes, like whether you feel like eating or not. Sometimes that's not a permanent obstruction to your hunger cues, but it can be if it's like long-term. And then as we age, that definitely changes. Our appetite can change. Typically, I see the appetite being kind of a low appetite, less interest in food and drinking water as people age. And then, of course, chemotherapy is a huge one. Most people on chemotherapy, they don't usually want to eat. Very few people who don't want to eat say they still feel hungry. A couple of them do. With cancer patients that I have worked with, there's one or two that say, oh, I do feel hungry, but I just can't eat. The smell is just terrible. I just can't do it. But most of them lose that desire to eat as well. All right. So this brings us into a natural appetite. We're trying to promote getting that natural appetite, those natural hunger and fullness cues back. So I like to tell adults this is like getting used to a new sleeping schedule. We've all had to get used to a new sleeping schedule. A mom who's had a new baby gets used to a new sleeping schedule. When you get a new job, you have to get used to a new sleeping schedule. Even changing seasons, like when kids are out of school, like during the school year versus the summer, we all have to get used to it. And time change, just the time change could be a really good example. And so our hunger cues and our appetite are like that too. We kind of have to get used to the new schedules and kind of switch up our eating patterns with that. So an adult who just isn't used to eating all the time, like a school teacher, let's say there's like a 6.5, 7 hour stretch almost every day that someone is not eating, their digestive system over time is going to start getting used to that. And your hunger cues are going to start becoming less and less and less. And like I said before, that's not necessarily a good thing. And that's why hunger diary is really good. Is because we need to identify those long periods of time and to nourish your body to refuel so that you can alleviate that brain fog and have the energy that you need, that tiredness that you can feel. And you don't want to overeat too, because overeating can maybe cause sluggishness and stuff too. So it's definitely something, kind of a balancing act that we can work out together. And but I also tell parents when we're dealing with a child who's struggling with this, it's kind of like potty training. We always tell our child that they have to learn how to listen to their body when we're potty training them, and it's a process. It's the same way when our child is not in tune with natural appetite, natural hunger, fullness cues. And it can really go both ways. You can have a child, and I've worked with several children who actually don't feel hungry. They can go hours and hours without eating, and it just puts so much worry. Parents just feel so much anxiety over that because they feel like they don't know how to provide the right kind of nutrition. And even if they are trying to provide it, they have to use strategies to be able to bring the child in and help them learn how to eat with a natural appetite too. But it can also be on the other side of the spectrum as well. We have children that just want to eat all the time. And to even slightly feel hungry, they just feel too uncomfortable that they don't like that uncomfortable feeling. And it's hard for them to wait for the next meal. So these are all things that we have to kind of give and take and play with and try to figure out and help correct that for adults, teenagers, and even young kids. So, all right, but everybody is different, and the goal is to help the household get on the same eating schedule. All right. And so you need to honor and fill your body at appropriate times of the day to meet your healthy energy needs. So that's what this is all about. That's what a natural appetite is. So I'm going to just quickly say that again, is a natural appetite honors your need to fuel your body at appropriate times of the day to meet your healthy energy needs. All right. So quickly, this is an example. My friend Carla, she has let me share this with you. She says, I never feel hungry at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, you would think that would be a normal time for people to eat, but I never feel hungry. She says, but 10 o'clock runs around and I feel so hungry almost all the time. I feel hungry at 10 o'clock. And I said, well, what time do you go to bed? And she's like, oh, well, I go to bed really, really late. and that kind of makes a lot of sense. But this is an example of what we're trying to do is getting us back into the pattern of a natural appetite. So let's take a look and kind of dissect the situation here just a little bit. I asked her, I said, well, what time do you want to go to bed? And she says, well, I actually want to be in bed by 10 o'clock. And so 7 o'clock would actually be a reasonable time to have dinner, right? Because you want to have dinner at least 3 hours, about 3 hours before you go to bed. So, but what do? She doesn't feel hungry at 7 o'clock. What do we do? So we kind of have to work in baby steps and some steps. And we actually want to start a feeding process at 7 o'clock to get her fueled and so that she can feel ready to go to bed at 10 o'clock and she's not hungry at 10 o'clock. Because if she's so hungry at 10 o'clock, of course she's not going to want to sleep. She's feeling too hungry. And we do have someone who had asked about that in our Reddit community. And so this really answers their question, because even they were telling us that they get up at a couple times during the night and that they feel hungry and they want to eat. And so it all kind of plays into, let's eat before we get hungry. Let's maybe set some timers and let's kind of make some baby steps and try to get back into that natural appetite, a healthy eating pattern and stuff, and wake up our digestive system, because our digestive system really does, actually, it really does adjust to our behaviors. And if we're not eating and it's happened for a long enough time, it's different for everybody, those hunger cues can slowly go away for you. And what we're trying to do is trying to get them back into a healthy pattern. All right. So here is a myth buster for you. Do you have to fast to lose weight or to have energy? And this also answers another question that we had in our Reddit community is, does intermittent fasting actually help you lose weight? And in a Harvard study, and this is just one study, is that they found that initially someone who wants to start on intermittent fasting, they found that initially people can lose maybe about 7 to 10 pounds, but then it just kind of falls off from there. Most people don't stay on the meal plan. It's not very sustainable. And what happens if it's not sustainable and you can't follow that plan forever, then you end up gaining it back. And I actually have a client who I'm going to share with you another example a little bit further on in the presentation that will further answer this question. But studies show that intermittent fasting increases your stress level. It can trigger anxiety and depression. It can also trigger overeating, and it can relapse in eating disorders. Someone who's had eating disorders in the past can definitely relapse them, and we don't want that. That can be very dangerous. So on the plus side, though, studies show periodic short-term fasting may improve REM sleep and human growth hormone if you're going to bed at a consistent time every night. And that is so important. And I like to bring that out because part of having a steady and good eating plan during your day, it actually starts, we plan that from when you wake up to when you go to bed at night, and we distribute the how you're going to fuel yourself throughout the day with proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, how you're going to hydrate yourself throughout the day. It really kind of plays into that outline of when you wake up and when you go to bed. So that consistent bedtime is really, really important. And I know sometimes it's super tempting that you want to like maybe watch Netflix, or you're kind of in the middle of a season and you just want to get it done and you kind of lose track of time, and then you're like, oh my gosh, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. What did I just do? And I've got to go to work in the morning. So you can see how this plays out. But I promise you will actually feel so much better if you work on a consistent bedtime that works for you, that gives you at least 7.5 hours of sleep every night. Some people actually need more. So as you kind of start figuring that out, some people actually prefer 8 or maybe 8.5. If you have a growing child, depending on their age, they may need up to 10 hours of sleep. A child who is done growing and stuff, they kind of reduce back and they may need only 8 or 9 hours of sleep. But then when they're going through puberty and they're teenagers and they're going through a growth spurt, then their sleep time and what they need may even increase again. So those are just all things to kind of think about when you're thinking about the dynamics of the family and how you're going to play out the eating patterns and take care of yourself and take care of your family. All right. So anyways, I hope that was very valuable and good information for you. So let's get into the next section of retraining your brain. Where do we start? And so what we need to do is actually start with the frontal lobe. And I actually planned out, and I have some notes here because I want to make sure that I get all of this for you. Give me just a second here and find them. All right. So I wanted to make sure that I got everything right here. Is your frontal lobe, what it does is it is in charge of your impulses and your planning, your self-management, and your decision making. So let's see here. I had some notes on that, and I want to make sure because I had a study that I wanted to go over with you on that. Okay, so here it is. So studies show that the frontal lobe plays a key role in future planning, self-management, and decision-making. It processes information that involves impulse control, mood, socialization, and contains the most dopamine-sensitive neurons. So you can see why emotional stress is kind of a big thing here. All right. So now that we have a little bit of background on our frontal lobe, this is going to play a big role in some of the mistakes that we make and some of the problems that we come across. So one of them is I can't stop eating. All right. So telling yourself that you can't have it actually makes you want to have it more, right? So when you deprive yourself of something that you really like, will trigger those signals off in your frontal lobe, and you know, and if you've ever felt this, you know what I'm talking about. So when you're triggered by a certain pain, the experience feels much like that you can't stop thinking about what you want in the moment until that emotion is soothed, right? So the solution is to create a personal and family planning strategy, and also to give yourself permission to have some, right? So remember, the frontal lobe is in charge of your decision making, self-management, and social interaction. So if you don't have a plan when your body is signaling hunger or other immediate stressful emotions, your brain, it just panics. And so sometimes your brain isn't that helpful to us. And so your frontal lobe is actually craving order. It really is. It wants you to plan. It needs to go through that critical thinking process. So this is a problem with like the overuse of dieting apps. Some of those food apps. I mean, they do have their benefits, but remember your brain has that, it's trying to control like that social aspect to create feedback in your decision making process. What's one of the main reasons people like to go to apps though? Like what's one of the main reasons? There's actually a lot of them. One, they feel too busy. They don't want to think. They want the work done for them, so they don't have to do anything, just so they just don't have to worry about it. They just want to be told what to do. And it just takes the thinking out of everything, right? So, but that's not what your brain really craves. It needs to go through those critical thinking processes, and it's like a muscle. Like if you don't use it, you lose it. So so let's go through like another problem and be thinking about the role that your frontal lobe plays in some of these scenarios here. So using food as a reward. How many of you have done that? If you've ever done that, we're all guilty. Even myself. Put a 1 in the comments or and start putting any of your takeaways that you have so far. But let's go ahead and we're going to start with exercise, and then I'm going to go in with the other mistake that sometimes we make is you have to eat your dinner first. So exercise is the reward. So this is the mindset that we need to be in, is that exercise is the reward. With this mentality, you can separate the joy of physical activity and eating as 2 separate activities. This gives you less pressure of doing one without the other. Eating and exercising can complement each other very well if you're fueling for fitness, not the other way around, okay? So the rewards that come with exercise: clothes fit looser. 2, it increases dopamine. It helps with that depression. It's kind of like that happy pill that helps us feel better. It can be calming. It produces the human growth hormone that tightens our skin. It helps you with more restful sleep. It helps you with more balanced blood sugar. It improves appetite, and you also get clearer hunger cues. So basically, exercise, it's a gift. It's a gift you give yourself every time you get your heart rate up, every time you stretch out, every time you push yourself a little bit further, every time you increase like the frequency of some of the physical activities. It is a gift. Unfortunately, sometimes that gets taken away prematurely for too many people. I've talked to too many people that I feel like they've lost the ability to be physically active, mostly because they just feel like they kind of lost track of themselves and they've gained too much weight. Their joints hurt. It's hard, but you can always start somewhere. There's always somewhere that you can start that will help build your cardiovascular system and get you some exercise. Even if it's like chair exercises, there's always a place where you can start. And even people, I've even seen people in their 70s and getting close to their 80s and up there, they are still able to build some muscle mass and improve their health through some physical activity. But let's just go here. So if you don't like exercising, let's just say some people just don't. They just don't like exercising. So don't exercise, right? But find a physical recreational activity that you do like to do. Find something and do it. Okay. So that's kind of the key right there, is because you want to give yourself that gift, and you want those rewards that come with it, because it will complement a healthy eating pattern really, really, really well. All right, so let's get into this one. Eating dinner. I hear this a lot. You have to eat dinner before you can have dessert. Well, guess what? Guess what? The solution is to this is serve dessert with dinner. And I get parents telling me all the time, if I really actually did that, that's all my child would eat. They would just eat dessert. And that's okay. That might actually happen for a little while. Why? Because dessert's been treated as a novelty. It's been classified as maybe a bad food, and we don't really want to classify food as bad or good. And if you tell them they can't have it, they're going to want it more. And they may even just eat the bare minimum of what they can eat before they're allowed to have dessert, right? So it kind of goes back to that novelty. So how we get around that is tell them, yeah, go ahead, take a portion, but also remind them that they can take everything else, some of the other items, and put them on the plate too. And they might think that you're totally strange. They might give you some weird looks like, whoa, is dad like really for real? But it really does reduce the novelty of desserts. It completely changes their idea about bad and good food. It gives them permission to have some, and it changes their mindset so they don't necessarily want it more. And you can also remember that you don't have to serve dessert all the time. All right. So, okay, here we are to the next problem, having crappy food around the house. I hear this all the time. How many of you have felt this way? How do I avoid eating food that's not beneficial to me? Well, take a look at these slides right here. Does this look familiar? Believe it or not, I just copy and pasted these steps, the frontal lobe, planning, self-management, and decision, right from a previous slide that you actually just saw, because those things it's actually the same way. You kind of solve this problem in the same way as you do any of the other mindset issues that you may have going on. So do these and if these sub points look familiar, just kind of reflect on how do they relate to you. If you relate to this, what are you thinking? Just kind of reflect yourself and just kind of think about how do these apply to you. So we've discussed how the frontal lobe controls the management center of your planning and decision-making processes. So this is a perfect representation to help us analyze how our brains may work in this type of situation. So first, if you have crappy food around the house, what part of your frontal management system are you not honoring? All right, so think about that for just a moment. All right, and it's planning. What action step can we take to avoid this? So what kind of plan do we need to set in place to avoid that? And then second, if you are consuming stuff that you consider crappy, what part of the frontal management system are you not honoring, right? And that would be self-management. And this may plant some conflicting thoughts inside of your head. You're doing something different than what you think you should be doing. Have you ever looked at something in hindsight and been like, maybe I shouldn't have done that? So these are just some things to be thinking about. One of the other problems that come along with this that I hear people say is, my partner keeps bringing all of this stuff home that's tempting to eat. And that's shifting blame. And of course, nobody likes to be blamed for something, but this actually does something more. It's actually telling yourself that you don't have control. And that's not honoring what your brain wants to do, because your brain wants to plan and it wants to be in control. So ultimately, your partner is not responsible for the food choices you make, but keep an open mind that they may enjoy this food and they may not be on the same stages of change that you are on right now. So try to just discover some of those foods that you guys like to enjoy together. All right, and ways to help solve overeating is to just do something calming. Have some you time, go for a run or a walk, read a book. There's 100 things we could put here, but work on an unfinished project. Any of that would work. So let's get into 5 steps that will help you with your overall mindset. Okay, so number 1. The truth is our thoughts are powerful. So step 1 actually starts with our thoughts. And this is something that we can journal our thoughts, and we can see the pattern of how those affect us and what we choose to eat. And then, of course, record how we feel and how we are going to respond to that. And then step 2 is you're going to review what you recorded. This helps you and your coach identify patterns that will help you design action steps to achieve your goals. So example is thoughts that conflict with each other, moments of stress, poor sleep, poor activity. This helps us identify a lot of things about you. And then the 3rd step is meditation. All right, so intentionally tell yourself encouraging sentiments. They don't always have to have a focus on food. In fact, it's probably good that they don't always have a focus on food. And then visualize yourself participating in a variety of activities and trying new foods. And then you also want to identify people in your life who can actually support you through your process. And then the 4th step is make a plan of action. So you're going to find out when you'll be able to do those activities that you just thought about. You're going to make a list of new foods that you want to try first, find recipes and budget for it, and then identify people in your life who need you, and then lift them up. And then the 5th step is to just take action. Take action on all those things that you plan to do. One of the things that I like to bring out here is help others abandon their own negative thoughts. If you're helping others abandon their negative thoughts, they are in turn going to help you and be a support system to you. And what you're doing is you're training yourself to have that positive cycle, and somebody who's going to be around you and support you, help them have that positive cycle. And it's going to be kind of a win-win where you're going to be able to feed off of each other. All right, which brings us to banishing quick fix dieting. All right. So I have a story about a friend, and she went on a juice diet. She was so excited about it, but you'll never believe how long that lasted for her. It lasted 2 weeks. I asked her how it was going, and she gave me like this disgusted look and said, have you ever tried eating all your food, drinking it all out of a cup? It was awful. She's like, all I could think of was just putting a steak on my plate. So it didn't last very long. And her kids who are playing football and volleyball were really glad to see that go. So that wasn't very sustainable. All right, this one's one that I want to spend just a little bit of time on. I had a former client who raved about intermittent fasting. She bragged about she didn't have to eat until 3 o'clock. And the problem is that when I asked her how it was going, she said, oh, I'm just tired all the time and I can't get anything done. I'm just trying to find ways to sleep any chance I get. And she had a hard time taking care of her kids. She had 2 kids at home. And that was just really a struggle for her. And we had to come up with a plan to help her get back into eating good patterns, and for her children. Her trainer was actually telling her that she needed to work out longer and she needed to work harder to lose weight. She wasn't losing weight on this. She had been doing it for a whole year. I mean, kudos to her that she didn't give up on it, but she wasn't losing any weight and she was trying really hard. She just felt like she was always doing something wrong. And that's not a good situation, because you do actually, in fact, have to fuel your body appropriately when you are in a fitness program. So that is really important. All right. And I'm going to skip this one, but I can go back to that later. I want to have time for some questions later. But this is my message. Fad diets have a negative outcome on individuals and for their family members too. All right. And go ahead and take a screenshot of this, because these are some things I want you to be aware of. Banishing quick fix dieting and avoid huge mistakes that will be hard to recover from. I laid it all out here, everything right here. So take a moment, if you got a chance, screenshot this and go back and have this to when you're looking at on social media, or your friends are asking you or telling you about certain diets or things that you feel excited about. Make sure that you can check this list off first, okay? All right, and then you need to know your WPFCs. This is something that you end up working out after you figure out what your hunger cues, your eating pattern, the times of day that you should be eating. Is we work out, well, how many grams fat and carbohydrates that look good for you, for your individual situation. And this is usually worked out and based upon feedback that I would receive from you. All right. So in conclusion, measure your rewards by how you feel and give yourself permission to enjoy all foods. And so let's go ahead and go through some of the questions that were asked. So some of the questions that were asked in our community was, what are the risks in taking metformin for weight loss? And this is actually a really great question. Metformin is actually a medication that people with type 2 diabetes take. And what it does is it helps them absorb blood glucose into their cells. So when the insulin is released, the problem with that is their blood glucose doesn't go into their cells and their blood sugar just gets high. So that's what this medication does. And anyways, there's some more information online here. I have a website, which I will put in the comments later if you want more reading. But the other part of this question is, are there risks for weight loss? And if you are prescribed metformin and you have with type 2 diabetes, no, it's actually a pretty safe medication. And if you're getting your blood sugars in, then yes, it is effective of helping people lose weight, but it's not for non-diabetic people, just to make that very clear. And then we already asked, does intermittent fasting actually help with weight loss? So we answered that question in the presentation. And then we also answered, I get so hungry at night. Any thoughts? I can eat a light breakfast, a decent lunch and dinner, but at 10 p.m. I am starving. And so I gave a very specific example and answered that question in the presentation as well. So I think we may have time for one more. I've heard that canned or frozen vegetables can have more nutritional value than fresh. Something about the nutrients getting locked in, while with fresh veggies, they leach out over time. Is this true? So this is a little bit of a loaded question. So yes, when you are cooking vegetables They do leach out, especially vegetables high in vitamin B. They do denature at lower temperatures. Canned foods does not lock in the nutrients because they're already leached out through that heating process. So if you don't have any chewing problems or anything, I always recommend steam your vegetables or eat them raw because they will have more nutrients in there. All right. The only thing that would give you more nutrients frozen are berries, because berries are picked at the peak of their ripeness and they're frozen. So you're actually going to get a higher nutritive value. You're going to have more vitamins in berries if you purchase them frozen as opposed to fresh, just because fresh berries are picked before they reach their peak of ripeness and they haven't achieved the full concentration of like those vitamins and minerals in there. So, and then we just have a couple of seconds here. Oh, what's more important for a guy who wants to shed pounds around the waistline, diet or exercise? Both. Definitely both. But if you hate exercise, and the nature of this question to me says he only wants to do one or the other. And if you have to pick one, which one would you pick? And I would pick diet, but definitely find ways to get some physical activity in there, because as we talked about in the presentation, that they definitely complement each other, and it will speed up the process and you're going to feel better. It's going to help with your sleep, and the gift of exercise is just phenomenal of what you can do for yourself. All right. And so that's it for today. Thank you for showing up. And if you want, you can always find me on Kounsel, and have a great day. Thank you, everyone.